This is on page 6 in our journal. It's our Unit 1 table of contents. Please make sure that yours looks like mine by filling in the page number and the title of that page. Before we start that part of the notes, I do have this little organizer thing that we're going to look at because it'll help us with our vocab, picturing what each of those terms means that we've talked about. Okay, so get that filled out, and then you can go ahead and turn to 13 and 14 and label them. This is how I labeled it. There are not steps that we're going to write out today, so you don't have to do that part. Okay, so we're looking at this little organizer here. We want the 3 holes at the top of the organizer, and we're going to fill in some information here, okay? So what I want you to write on your paper, and these 4 blanks right here, we're going to write 5x here, -3 here, +8 here, and -2x right here. All right, 5x minus 3 plus 8 minus 2x. What is this whole thing called? Expression. Is it an expression or an equation? Expression. How do we know it's an expression? There is no equal sign. So fill in expression at the top. Right here in parentheses, we're going to write no equal sign. So if I were to give you an expression, would the directions say solve or simplify? Simplify. And why is it not solve? Because there is no equal sign. Okay? Now, this thing right here is called what? This is the coefficient, this is the variable, but what's this whole thing? Don't cheat. It's a term. Okay, so we're going to write term right here. What is this called? It's a term, and this is a term, and this is a... So how many total terms do we have?
4.
We have 4 total terms on this paper. Okay, now this guy right here is called what? A coefficient. Do I have any other coefficients on this paper? What's the coefficient? -2. So what I want you to do is we're going to draw another arrow, but we're going to go all the way around the outside and up like that. Make sure your arrow is pointing at the -2, not at the x, not in between the 2 of them. Make sure it's obvious where that arrow is pointing. Okay, how do we know that that's a coefficient? It's the number in front of the variable. Oops, number in front. Okay, what is this thing called right here? That's a variable. Do I have another variable? Where is it? Behind the -2. Make sure that arrow is clearly pointing at the x, not at the -2, not in between them, but at the x. Okay, and then these last 2 are called what? Constant. Good. How do we know that those are constants?
They don't have.
They never change.
They don't have variables attached. They never change. In parentheses, we're going to write number by itself, meaning there's no variable with it. All right. And then different types of variables, we can use X or Y or A or Z or B or D or C. Would we want to use O or L?
No.
And because?
Because it looks like a 1 and a 0.
Good, they look like numbers. What's up?
Why would we use X if it looks like multiplication?
In algebra, we typically don't use an X to show multiplication. We'll use parentheses or the dot or just push them together. So, I don't know why X is the most common one. I don't know. Sorry, I don't have the answer to that. All right, questions about this thing? Okay, we're not going to take the time right now to do this, but what I do want you to do is fold this in half so the good stuff's on the inside. And then stick it on, like right here, page 8 is where we have our vocabulary. So I want you to just kind of put this right there where that vocab is, because eventually we will glue it on page 7. But like I said, we're just not going to take the time to do it right this second. Okay? Once you've done that, go ahead and turn to pages 13 and 14. And we're going to start our notes for today. Bless you. Okay, so like I told you already, we do not have steps that we're going to write today. There's a couple of things that I will have you write, but I'll let you know when that needs to be. Okay, so when I created this notes page, I tried to pick the scariest font I could find, since we're talking about fractions, because everybody's afraid of fractions, it seems. Guys, I promise you, just about everybody that has left my room today has said that's not nearly as difficult as I thought it was going to be. Okay, so take comfort in that. It shouldn't be that difficult. Okay, even if you don't like fractions, even if you're not good at fractions, we're going to be able to work through these without really having to deal with the fractions a whole lot. Okay, so let me ask you this. Okay, in the past, you have learned something called least common multiple. Does anyone remember learning that? Even if you can't define it, do you remember hearing those words maybe? Okay, so there's a few of you that remember hearing those words. What about greatest common factor? Okay, more people typically remember those because you do it a little bit more than you do least common multiple. You probably learned them about the same time. I know I did when I was your age, or younger than you probably, because it wasn't in 8th grade that I learned it. But anyway, I remember talking about those at about the same time. Okay, I'm going to add a page in here. There we go. Okay, so greatest common factor is something we will do a whole lot more in the spring. Okay, because it's going to help us with one of our units. But if I told you to find the greatest common factor of 12 and 18, what would you tell me? 6. Why is it 6?
Is this the only one that multiplies and goes?
We're looking for what can we divide both of those numbers by, right? The biggest number that both of those can be divided by. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so normally when you're thinking a greatest common factor, you think divide. Okay, well for least common multiple, if I ask you for the least common multiple of, let's say 3 and 4, do you know the answer?
Off the top of my head.
12. Who said 12? Was it Armani? Good. Someone else back here said it too. Who else said it? David? All right, good. Okay, 12 is the least common multiple. So what you're looking for when you think least common multiple is what will both of those numbers multiply into. Okay, so instead of thinking division, we're thinking multiplication. Okay? So if you think about the factors of 3, we have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24. Did I miss any? I don't think so. Okay. The factors of 4 are 4, or the multiples of 4 are 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. Now, do you see any that repeat?
12 and 24.
12 repeats and 24 repeats. Okay, but which one did I ask you for? The least, which would be which one?
12.
The 12. Does that make sense? Do you remember that a little bit now? Okay. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. Okay, so going back to this screen, what I want you to do, so you've already titled your paper at the top, so just right below your title on page 13, which is on the left side, I want you to write multiply by the least common multiple. Multiply by the least common multiple. All right, now what I want you to do, now that you have written that down, I want you to skip the next 2 lines. And then the line after that is where we're going to work our first example. Okay, so I want you to write this down, this down as our first example. So you've written multiply by the least common multiple, skip 2 lines, and now write this example. What do you notice? They're all fractions. What else? It looks scary. What did you say?
They're in a line straight across.
Okay, it's in a line straight across. What else?
It's all 2 or 1, 2, or 3.
All the numbers are either a 1, 2, or a 3. There's 2 X's. There's an equal sign. There's no negatives.
Both equations are addition.
Both sides show addition. Uh-huh.
It's a multi-step distribution.
It's a multi-step problem. Is there distribution? No, because I don't have any parentheses, but that's good. It is a multi-step equation. Okay, what do you notice about the fractions specifically? Do we have common denominators, uncommon denominators?
They're proper fractions.
They're proper fractions. Ooh, I like that. What does that mean?
It means that the smaller numbers on top.
The smaller numbers on top. Very good. So we have 4 different fractions. How many different denominators? 2. Okay. What are those denominators?
3 and 2.
3 and 2. So whenever we're talking about the least common multiple, we're looking at the denominators. Okay. So I want the least common multiple for 2 and 3, which would be what? 6. Does everybody understand how it's 6? Because 2 will go into 6 and 3 will also go into 6. Okay, and it's the smallest number. What's another number that they both will go into, but it's not the smallest? 12 or 24 or 18. All of those are common multiples, but 6 would be the least common. Does that make sense? Okay, now let me ask you this. How many terms are in this problem? 4. What's the first term, Patrick?
1/2 x.
1/2 x. Ross, what's the second term?
2/3.
What kind of 2/3?
Positive.
Positive 2/3. Zayden, what's the third term?
1/3 x.
Good. And Kaylee, what's the fourth term?
Positive 1/2.
Very good. Okay. So we have 4 terms here. Okay. I want you to write this stuff down if you've not already, please. Just over to the side somewhere. So the least common multiple for 2 and 3, which came from our denominators, is 6. And we have 4 terms. Okay. So what we're going to do is this tells us what we're going to multiply by, and this tells us how many times we're going to multiply by it. So what is it that we're going to multiply by? 6. And how many times are we multiplying by it? 4. 1 time for each term. So whenever we are getting rid of fractions, we're going to multiply every single term by the least common multiple. Does that make sense? Every single term. Okay? So I'm going to use different colors to show this so that it maybe helps visualize a little bit better. My first term, like Patrick told me, is 1/2 x. So I'm going to multiply that by 6. This is why you left those 2 spaces above it so that you can have room to show that you're multiplying by 6. Okay? Ross told us that our second term is 2/3. So I'm showing that I'm multiplying the second term by 2/3. All right, and then Zayden told us that 1/3 x was the third term. So I'm showing times 6 there. And Kaylee told us positive 1/2 for the last one. So I'm multiplying by 6 there. So how many times on the board do you see times 6?
4 times.
4 times. How many terms did we say we had?
4.
4 terms. So did we multiply every term by 6?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and draw this line. And now we're actually going to do that math. Okay? Now, I know that some of you are better at fractions than others. I know that there are some fractions we will deal with today that you can do in your head. Especially for this first example, I want you to write it down regardless of whether you know the answer or not. Okay, the reason for that is because if you get to a problem where you can't do it in your head, you need to be able to find how to do it. Okay, so it's easy to see whenever you've got something that you already know the answer to. All right, so my first term that I'm multiplying by 6 was what? 1/2. So I'm doing 1/2 times 6. Now what do I do with that 6 to make it easy to multiply? Put it over 1. So 6 over 1. Now when you multiply fractions, do you multiply diagonally or straight across?
Straight across.
Straight across. Very good. We have 1 times 6, which gives me 6, and 2 times 1, which gives me 2, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So what is my new term over here? 3x. Okay, now like I'm saying, some of you could look at that and say, I know that half of 6 is 3, and you can do that automatically. That's fine in the future problems. But for this first one, I want to see them written. Okay? All right, next term is what?
2/3.
2/3, and I'm multiplying by 6 over 1 again. How do I multiply? Straight across. What's 2 times 6?
12.
12, and 3 times 1? 3, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. So what is my second term in this equation? Positive 4. Is everybody with me so far? Any questions? All right. Now what's my next term? Are you good, Logan? Sorry, I just saw you had your finger up. Okay. My next one is 1/3. What am I multiplying by? 6 over 1. How do I multiply? Straight across. 1 times 6 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3. And 6 divided by 3 is 2. So what is my third term now? 2x. And then my last term is what? 1/2 times 6. We've already done that math. You can do 1/2 of 6 in your head for the most part. So like we've already said, it's a positive 3. Now, does this look like an equation that we can solve?
Yes.
Yes, let's do so. What are we going to do first?
Subtract 2x.
Put the x.
Get our x's on the same side. We're moving the smallest one so that we avoid what? A negative number. Very good. What did we create right here?
A 0
A
pair.
0 pair. Very good. On the right side, what's left over?
Positive 3.
Oops. Sorry. Positive 3 left on the right side. And on the left side, what do I have now? 1x plus 4. Is it necessary to write the 1 in front of the x? No. All right, now I'm trying to get x by itself, so what am I going to do with that positive 4? Subtract 4. What is 3 minus 4?
Negative 1.
Negative 1. What did we create right here?
0
A
pair.
0 pair, and what's left?
X.
X. So that's your answer. So do you see how this fraction problem wasn't nearly as scary as it looked?
It looks like
How do we?
It looks way difficult, right? But then when we actually start dealing with it, it's pretty easy.
How do we check it?
It's a lot of numbers. Yeah. Okay, any questions?
We need to check it.
Okay, so that's a good question. How do we check it? I better be your favorite teacher after this because I'm not going to make you check your work tonight. Okay, now let me tell you this. I'm going to show you how you can check it using your phone if you have a calculator on your phone. Okay. Also, what you can do is you can come see me either before school tomorrow, during jacket time, or during lunch, and have me check your work for you. That way you have an opportunity to fix it before you come to class, because you only have 5 problems for homework, which means they're worth how many points apiece? 20. So how many can you miss and still pass? 1. Yes.
Can't you, like, after you get all the fractions, the whole numbers, and then it's a multi-step equation, can we check it like that?
Okay, so y'all listen, okay? Okay, so the question was, can we check from this point right here? So could you take your answer and plug it in for x's in that multi-step equation? The answer is yes. However, we're pretty dang good at stuff like this now, right? Okay, we've spent a few days on that now. So chances are, if we made a mistake, it's not in this process right here. It's in this process right here. And by plugging this answer back in right here, it doesn't check to make sure that these are done correctly. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's important that if you're going to check it, yes, you can plug it into our whole number equation, but we're still not checking to make sure we got rid of the fractions correctly. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is this. How many of you have an iPhone or a smartphone? Okay, I don't know anything about a different brand than an iPhone. Okay, I'm just going to be honest. I don't know anything about it. I do know this. There is a free graphing calculator app no matter what type of phone you have. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is the way it works on the iPhone, since that's what I have. Okay, it's not super easy to see on the screen, but hopefully you can see enough to know what's going on. Okay, so if you just go to your app store with whatever carrier you have or whatever, and type in free graphing calculator, this should be the first one that pops up on iPhone. All right, and that's the one that I have. So if you go to it, I'm going to clear it out so you can't see what I did in the last class. Okay, what you can do is use the calculator to check your answer. All right, so what you would do is open your parentheses. Our first thing said 1/2 times x, right? Our first term was 1/2 x. So when 1/2 times -1, close the parentheses, and then we were adding 2/3, correct? And then add 2 divided by, oops, I got something in there I didn't need. 2 divided by 3. And when I hit enter, I know it's probably hard to see on the screen, but it says 0.16 repeating. Okay? So that's the left side of the equation. Now I can type in the right side. Was it 1/3 x? So 1 divided by 3 times, times -1. Do you know why I'm putting in -1?
Yes.
That's what we said x was. And then I'm adding 1/2.
Yes.
Close parentheses, equals, and it gives me the same thing, which tells me that I did it right. Okay, now if you don't have an iPhone but you have a calculator, you can do the same thing in just like your regular calculator. It's not as easy because you can't type all of it in at once probably, but what will happen, I did it earlier today just to see what it looked like, and whenever I did that, what happened was when I checked it, I got 0.2 equals 0.3. Now, is that technically a true answer? Is that a true statement? 0.2 equals 0.3. But is it pretty dang close?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so that would mean that you probably did it right. Now, if you were to get something like this, 0.2 equals 1.3, is that very close? No, so probably something's wrong somewhere. Okay, so as long as it's pretty close, that's okay. But like I said, if you would rather bring it to me and let me check your answers, I will absolutely do that. Okay, I'd rather you do that than to just assume. Okay? All right, questions on number 1. All right, let's get started on our second problem. Okay, what do you notice about this problem? There's negatives, there are whole numbers,
There's so many fractions.
2 numbers that aren't fractions. What do you notice about the fractions?
They don't have denominator.
There's not a common denominator. Do you notice anything else about the fractions?
They are close to each other, like they can be added.
So the denominators are close to each other. It would be easy to get a like denominator if we wanted to.
You can change the half to like 2/4.
You could change the half to 2/4. Okay, but what else can we do? Multiply by the least common multiple. Okay, so remember the least common multiple, what part of the fraction are we looking at? The denominator. So what are my two denominators?
4 and 2.
4 and 2. So I'm looking for the least common multiple of 4 and 2, which is what?
8.
4.
4.
8 is a common multiple, but is it the least common?
No.
Okay, so here's the deal. If you want to use 8, guess what? You'll get the same answer. Okay, probably what's going to happen if you use 8 is you're going to end, not probably, this is what will happen. If you use 8 instead of 4, you're going to end up with bigger numbers. Okay, you'll still be able to get the right answer. You're just going to have bigger numbers throughout your problem, okay? All right, so we're going to use 4. Now, how many terms do we have on this problem?
4.
4 terms. What's the first term? 1/4. What's the second term?
-2.
-2. The third term?
-1/2x.
-1/2 x. And the fourth term? -3. Very good. So we have 4 terms. So how many times are we going to be multiplying by 4? 4 times. So we're multiplying by this number this many times. Okay? Would you like for me to do the color coordinated again, or am I good to go in one color? Does anybody want to see all 4 colors? It's fine if you do. Okay. So I've got times 4 here, times 4 here, times 4 here, and times 4 here. So how many times did I multiply by 4? 4 times. And how many terms did I have? 4 terms. Okay? So the first term that I'm multiplying by is what? 1/4 times 4 over 1. What's 1? How do I multiply? Straight across or diagonally? Straight across. So 1 times 4 is? 4. 4 times 1 is? 4. 4 divided by 4 is? 1. So what is my new term?
1x.
1x. Is it necessary to write the 1?
No.
No. Does everybody follow what we just did right there? Okay. Put your pencils down for just a second, and I want to show you something. Okay? How many of you like to do something in your head if you can? Okay, that's me too. All right, so I'm going to show you something that you may or may not understand. If you understand it, great, do it. If you don't understand it, show it like this. Okay, it's not the end of the world. You'll eventually get to where, I'm not kidding you, like in the years past, we've done stuff like this, and then like mid-January, somebody goes, oh, I get it now. Okay, so you may not get it right this second, but at some point you will. Okay, so do you notice how right here with this term, the number I am multiplying by is the same as my denominator? Does everybody see that? I'm multiplying by 4, my denominator is 4. What ends up happening is those cancel out and you're left with the numerator.
That's
Okay, do you see it? Okay, so let's look at this. What if I have 2/3 x and I'm multiplying by 3?
The answer is 2.
The 3's cancel out and my answer is 2x. Does everybody see that? Does that make sense? Like I said, if that doesn't make sense, it doesn't mean you're dumb or anything, okay? It just means that you need to show it over here, okay? Now, we will have one in a minute where, I think we will anyway. Let's say we're doing 3/4x times 8. Are they going to cancel out now?
No.
No. Okay, but what is 8 divided by 4? 2. And 2 times 3 is? 6. So that would be your answer. Okay, let me prove it to you. 3/4, you're getting a little excited on your stability ball over here. Let me prove it to you. What's 3 times 8? 24. 4 times 1? 4. 24 divided by 4 is? 6. Do you see how that works? Okay, the other thing you could do, instead of doing the division like that, what's 3 times 8? 24 divided by 4? 6. Okay, so if you want to do it that way, you can. If not, show your work. I'm going to continue to show my work in case there's someone that needs to see it. Okay, now here, what am I multiplying by 4 now? -2 times 4 is what? -8. Now I have 1/2 times 4/1, which gives me 4 over 2 when I multiply straight across, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. If you looked at that and saw half of 4 is 2, that's totally fine. What's my new term? Negative 2x. Please be careful that you aren't leaving off negatives. Okay, because people have been doing that throughout the day. Make sure you pay attention to the sign. All right, and then the last one is negative 3 times 4, which is negative 12. Is this an equation that we can solve? Yes. Please do so on your own. You will get a fraction answer. I'm going to pause the podcast, restart it when you're ready. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my smaller variable term to the other side by adding it. So I'm adding 2x to both sides. I've created a 0 pair here. I have 3x minus 8 equals negative 12. Now I need to get rid of the negative 8 by adding it. Another 0 pair. 3x equals negative 4. And then my final step is to divide by 3. X equals negative 4 over 3. Now, how many of you in this room did it exactly like I did it? How many of you in this room moved the x instead of the negative 2x? Did you still get negative 4/3? Did you still get negative 4/3? Good. Anybody else do it that way? And did you get it? All right, good. Any questions on this one? Okay. Here's our last one. While you're writing it down, I want you to listen to me very, very carefully. Okay? I'm going to show you how I want you to solve this problem. People that try to do it a different way, like I can't think of a single time that someone tried to get rid of the fraction first and got it correct. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm going to show you what I want you to do first. So we're going to deal with that fraction, that 1/4 for a minute. We're going to deal with it and then get rid of it in our second step. People that try to get rid of it in step 1 always miss it. Like, I can't think of a single person in 6 years that did it correctly. You see what I'm saying? Please do it the way I'm showing you to do it. Okay? So what I want you to do, over to the side, if you've moved on to page 14, that's great. Okay? You're probably going to need to if you have not moved over yet, because this problem's going to take up quite a bit of space. Okay? So please be on page 14 at this point. What I want you to do, over to the right, if you've got some room, I want you to write distribute first. And I want you to put a exclamation point, and I want you to underline it or circle it or do something to draw your attention to those words. It is very important that you do it this way first. Like I said, people that don't always miss it. Yes?
Will you distribute the x8 and then the other x8?
Okay, so let's look at it as we go. Okay, so first of all, let's get rid of, or let's draw our line. Okay, do I have any distribution that's going to happen on the left side? No, so I'm just going to rewrite negative 1/2 x plus 2/3. Okay, now on the right side, how many sets of parentheses do I have? 2. So how many times am I distributing? 2. The first set, what is it that I'm distributing? Negative 1/4, so I need to circle it. For the second set, what am I distributing? The negative 1, so I'm going to circle it. All right, so here I have negative 1/4 times x, which gives me what?
Negative 1/4 x.
Negative 1/4 x. Did that answer your question? Thought so. Okay, what am I going to do now?
Negative 1/4.
Multiply it by negative 8.
Multiply negative 1/4 by negative 8. What's a negative times a negative?
Positive.
Positive. And if you need to see it, 1/4 times 8 over 1. 1 times 8 is 8. 4 times 1 is 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. If you could do it in your head, that's totally fine. What do we do next?
Multiply
The next
negative.
problem.
Multiply by negative 1. The next set of distribution, what's negative 1 times x?
Negative 1x.
Negative 1x. Negative 1 times 2?
Negative 2.
Negative 2. Now, what I want you to do we're going to do this pretty quickly, okay? I want you to, on your paper, write how many terms you think there are in this problem and cover it with your hand, and then only show me. How many terms are in this problem?
The first one or the second one?
The entire problem. Not one side versus the other. Total
No.
terms in the whole problem.
Like the top
Oh,
one
I'm
or-
sorry. This one right here.
Alright.
After we've distributed, how many terms do we have? Okay, let me see. I see it. See what you got? Alright. Okay. Alright. Almost everybody got it right. Okay? What's my first term? This one right here, negative 1/2 x. My second term, 2/3. My third term, negative 1/4 x. My fourth term, 2. My second or my fifth term, negative x. My sixth term, negative 2. We're not looking at just the ones that have fractions. We're looking at total. How many terms? And there are 6 terms. What's our least common multiple? So we're looking for the LCM of 2, 3, and 4. 12. Does everybody see how it's 12? 2 will go into 12. 3 will go into 12. 4 will go into 12. Some people today have said 24. Did anybody think that? Okay, 24 is a common term. It's not the least common. You can use 24. You're just going to have bigger numbers. Okay, so how many times am I multiplying by 12? 6 times. Oops. Okay, we're going to move pretty quickly here. What's half of 12? It'll be a negative 6. Here I have 2/3 times 12. So 2 times 12 is 24 divided by 3 is 8. 1/4 of 12?
3.
Negative 3x, good. 2 times 12? 24. Negative x times 12? Negative 12x. And negative 2 times 12? Negative 24. What do we need to do now?
Combine common terms.
Combine like terms first. Okay, so what do I have that are like terms?
24 and 24.
Positive 24 and negative 24, and what's going to happen right there? There's 0. All right, and then I have negative 3x and negative 12x, which is
Negative 15x.
negative 15x. All right, now I'm going to add 6x to both sides. Even though that's not moving the smaller one, it's okay. How do I get x by itself? By what?
9.
Negative 9. So my answer is 8 over negative 9, or negative 8 over 9, or negative 8/9, however you want to write it. Okay? Now, let me show you. I know we did that problem super fast. Let me show you what your homework's going to look like. If the bell rings, just hang out for a second, okay? Listen, shh. This is what the homework looks like. There are 5 problems. The directions say, solve the following equations for the given variable. Show all work on a separate sheet of paper. What does it say? Show all work on a separate sheet of paper. Show all work on a separate sheet of paper. Record your answers on this page. Record your answers on this page. Show your work on a separate sheet of paper. Record your answers on this page. Is everyone clear on the directions? Yes, ma'am. All right. If you need a sheet of notebook paper, there's some up here. You can come grab it. Otherwise, put your things away.